Okay, welcome back, everybody. There's something that I realized that I haven't spoken about that's pretty elementary, my dear Watson, when it comes to trauma. And it comes from the teaching of Dr. Dan Spiegel, and then again, Janina Fisher. But they talk about the window of tolerance. That if you can imagine in the center here is a window of tolerance. We go through life, we're fairly happy, a little bit down, up and down, the regular up and downs of life. Something traumatic happens, something totally stress producing happens, and we become hyper aroused. We go into fight or flight. And we go into taking our stands, we feel attacked and we address that, or we just like, I'm out of here, take off. In the middle is the window of tolerance. That's where we want to be. But sometimes something stressful happens and we become hypo-aroused. We crash down into freeze or fawning. Freeze is, like me dissociating after that accident, just not, people might have tried to talk to me, but nothing was getting through. I was frozen, or I might be for days kind of like in a stunned state, frozen. Or fawning, which is also referred to in the books by some people as please and appease, which is like a super codependency. It's like I'm in an abusive relationship and I know what triggers my husband to violence. And so I tiptoe around him and he's going, you're stupid, you're mentally ill. And I'm going, yes, you're right. Yes, I am. Anything to keep it calm. Please and appease. We lose our sense of self and we give ourselves over to the situation, also known as a type of cognitive dissonance, they call it. And we were just talking now, for example, when you're a prisoner and you're in the system there, you know how it works. You want to say what the guards want to hear so that they don't, penalize you even more. And so you go, yes, sir, no, sir, under your breath. But you're doing that. So that's pretty fundamental that people seem to fall into those categories: fight, flight, freeze, or like I said, fawning. Dr. Walker calls it fawning, and Janina Fisher calls it please and appease. So I neglected to mention that. Someone else brought to my attention something that's important to note is, and I know you're not therapists, but sometimes if somebody's coming and they want to talk to you about scary things, you want to be mindful where the door is. If this is somebody that goes into fight or flight, you want to make sure that they can get to the door and they can get out if they want to, that there's not a lot of obstacles in their way. So we're very aware of that, those of us that are therapists, and how we set up our offices so that we're not in the firing line when the person wants to get out. And so you just want to make sure that there's the door, there's the out if you need to go. Okay. So now we're going to get into, I called it practical skills, but it's more of the same. One of the things I do with everybody that I'm helping, either I do it in a written form, this is even with just a friend, but I do it with every client too, is I do an emotional safety plan. And I always say, when I feel wobbly, that's my clinical term for, out of sorts. When I feel wobbly, I will. And I get them to write it out, because at the moment when you're feeling, agitated, affected, disturbed, wobbly, you're not going to think of these things. So I always start with, I will pray, oh God, help me. I'll focus on my breathing. And when I breathe in for 5, I hold for 7, I breathe out for 9 or 10. And there's many different breathing techniques you can use. That's just one of them. I might start to sing or hum, because singing or humming calms down the vagal nerve that we talked about. I may do tapping, you know, and there are specific tapping like places you can tap, but really when you think this part of the brain is controlled by this part of the body, this part of the brain is controlled by this part of the body, the right part of the brain is what tends to hold the trauma memories. The left part of the brain has got a lot of executive functioning, has got a lot of logical senses, and it's just a good idea to tap, either to tap, to do tapping, to do the butterfly, get both parts of the brain stimulated at the same time. And some people do tapping where there's a sequence of tapping up here under the eye and here, you know, there's a whole sequence of tapping. Yeah, that's right. I think it's just good that you're stimulating bilaterally, that you're doing some bilateral stimulation. You want to use all parts of the brain, because what happens when you feel wobbly, you feel a traumatic reaction, is that it's almost like the center part of the brain sets up a force field, and it becomes really hard to think of the stuff you know, the logical stuff you know, to help the traumatic stuff. So when I had COVID, I was really sick. I was 5 days in the hospital, all my hair fell out, boo-hoo, it was awful. And people would say to me, you know, when I'd be like, ah, you know, and it was like a little kid, I was like scared. And come on, Susan, you're a nurse, you know how to take care of yourself. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I didn't feel like I was a nurse. I didn't feel like I knew anything about nursing. All I knew is that I wished I had a mommy that could come and take care of me. You know, that's how I felt. Probably would have helped if I'd done some tapping, you know, just so that both parts of the brain were activated and were as alert as they could be under that kind of stress. So then, and you write this out, and then you want to go into the 5 senses and you ask the person, okay, and we did this a little bit earlier, hearing, you know, what can you listen to that helps calm you and soothe you? Okay, that playlist on Spotify, listening to my friend's voice, you know, listening to children play, you know, what can you see? And you name things that you can see. I love to see flowers. I love to see, you know, things that are soothing and calming, my baby's face, my animals. What can you touch? Something soft and fluffy, my cat. You know, what can you smell? You know, I love smelling lavender. What can you taste? Probably chocolate and ice cream, because that seems to help just about anything, except my goals. And then the grounding techniques. One of the things when you start to feel yourself getting agitated like this, go throw cold water in your face. That's going to regulate your nervous system. I get cold water in your face. Get a cold cloth, put it on your head. And so that those blood vessels aren't hugely causing pressure, but instead shrink down. You know, shake yourself up, shake, 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 and that helps to regulate the nervous system. Hang like a rag doll for a while. That helps when you stand up. Yeah, you can feel it through your whole body. Just kind of regulates the nervous system. So those are good exercises. Grounding, maybe you go for a walk. Maybe you watch something that's healthy on TV. Maybe you talk to a friend. But what is your list? You write it down. You write down who is safe to call. And then you take your emotional safety plan, you keep it in your bag, in your pocket, in your purse, whatever. And maybe you give it to your best friend or your partner. Because when you're really upset at first, you're not going to remember to do any of those things. But the person that's closest to you, that you turn to, it's good for them to know, to know that you've written down here, don't touch me when I'm upset. When I'm not upset, you can come and hug me, but when I'm upset, don't touch me. And so that's probably good to know. There you go. And you write these things down until you can get it really clearly in your mind that you've got a plan of action. Okay? And let's see. And then here, we don't rescue people unless they're unconscious. Now, someone was talking to me about doing interventions, like addiction interventions. And how do you do an intervention when somebody's been traumatized? That's a good question. Because the point of the intervention is to pull up the bottom and smack them upside the head with it, right? And so that sounds a little traumatizing. But I think if the point of the intervention is that the people who truly love the person that's in crisis is there to communicate their love of that person and in a loving way present choices and consequences. Therefore, you know, brother, I really love you, but your behavior has been so violent lately, you know, that, and the children miss you. They really want you in their life, but I can't have you come over until you have got 3 months, 6 months, a year of sobriety, however long. And I really hope you choose to get help, because if you choose not to get help, then you're also choosing not to spend time with your nieces and nephew. But that's done in a very loving context, instead of further blaming and shaming the person. And, do you know that you broke into my house and you did this, you did, not the you statements, but the I feel statements. I certainly believe with teenagers, with young people, and some people, I have certainly pulled the bottom up and, to do a confrontation with them, but tried to do it in the context of a loving, caring relationship that I have with them. Most of the time it doesn't work. For me, anyway, it doesn't seem to work. But I think that using the method where you look at stages of change and you take the time with the person is better, but sometimes the person is on the edge of death. You got to do something. So you do what you got to do. Generally, I don't rescue unless the person's unconscious. I want to help people to help themselves. And this gets into the fact that you don't have to be the hero in the story. You don't have to martyr yourself for somebody else. You don't have to, do more work than the other person is willing to do. It's like a Fred Astaire dance, they're going to take the lead and you follow. You're not leading, you're letting them lead. You're giving suggestions and stuff, but when they say, okay, that's the lead. If they don't want to make some changes in their life and you're offering them the choices and the options, then you need to recognize that they're not ready to make changes in their life. And you can't drag them by the nose. And nor is that good for you. So you want to be careful that you're a caregiver and not a caretaker, right? That you're not giving your care because you need to be seen as a hero, or you need the accolades of, wow, are you ever a nice, good person? And this kind of stuff. Check your motivations. Be very careful. Caregiving is more about, I'm giving you my care because it's good and right to do, but ultimately you have choices in your life. You can choose to go to hell itself if that's what you choose. You have choices. You may choose to live your life and not experience the joy that God's got planned for you. That's your choice. Yes, I want to tell you that there's a better way, that there's another way, but you have choices in your life. So that's a tough one. Yeah, this one. And there's a wonderful book out called Avoiding the Messiah Complex, if you think that you may have a little bit of a Messiah complex. So I've already said, you don't want to be the only support that the person has. You don't want to try to heal your own problems by healing somebody else's problems, nor do you want to presume to be the healer. You know, Jesus takes care of that really good. You know, you want to be the encourager, but the person has to do their own work. You don't want them to become so dependent on you that they can't function without you. The whole thing is to create health, wholeness, and independence. I always believe, and I tell it to my students, that every counselor needs a counselor. Okay, you might say, oh, that's good, I'm not a counselor. But every helper needs to have accountability and some supervision to make sure that we can handle the power that comes with trying to speak into the life of another person. You know, it can be quite a seductive experience. We want to make sure that we're accountable. We want to set boundaries and we want to adhere to them. So maybe you have a boundary where maybe you're working with folks that are addicted, and your boundary is that you're not going to take them home with you, which isn't a bad boundary, you know, but you want to make sure that you don't break your own boundaries that you set. You know, even if I say our session goes till 5 o'clock, and then here we are at 5:15, I'm not doing you a service by breaking the boundary. I need to honor the fact that we've made an agreement, that there's a time structure and this is what it looks like. And because that's safety, that's dependability. People need boundaries. Have I told you the story of the children? I think it was in Manhattan, where there was a big traffic circle, and they took a bunch of school kids and they put them in the traffic circle and they said, go play, we'll be back in half an hour. And the children all moved to the center of the circle and played. And then another time came and they put a fence around the traffic circle and they put the children in and said, go play. And they played right to the edge of the fence. Yeah, as much as teens like to rebel, or we like to rebel against boundaries, boundaries make us feel safe. And so that's important. Don't try to be an expert in things you know little about. Okay, so do you know where I get the majority of my clients? Out of 12-step programs, who would say that they felt hurt and violated by doing a step 4 with a sponsor that didn't know what they were talking about. Sponsor that probably really cared. A sponsor that really probably cared for them. And maybe the sponsor has got some incredible recovery themselves. But if you think that everybody's going to recover the way that you recover, you're not doing a service to them, because everybody's got different paths. For some of them, some people, AA is the only way, but at the end of the day, I don't care how you got sober and how you're experiencing recovery, so long as you do it. You know, whether you do it in the SMART program or whether you do it in other types of programs. But when we find that there's a sponsor, for example, that thinks that she's Anna Freud, you know, Zygmunt's daughter, and wants to delve deep into stuff that you don't know about, you start playing in the arena of other people's psyches, you can cause real harm. And you mean well, and you want to do well. And you might even think that God wants you to do well in this area, but you know, it can cause so much harm. And I want to say that too, now that I mentioned God, thank you, Lord, that all these principles I'm giving you can all be uprooted if you strongly feel the Holy Spirit's telling you to move in a different direction. You know, who am I to say that this is the only way here, when God might have you do something completely unorthodox and completely different? You know, I know when we did street outreach and we'd go out with our sandwiches and sleeping bags and stuff we were giving to homeless people when it was -30 out. You know, I remember having students with me. We saw a fella sleeping on a heating vent. I knew he's been sleeping there for 18 years. You know, like that's his spot. Rain, shine, winter, summer, he's always on that heating vent. And I asked the students, what do you think that fella needs? You know, before we go up to him. Oh, he needs to be in a shelter. Oh, he needs a sleeping bag. He needs this, he needs that. I said, well, let's just ask him what he needs. We asked him and he needed a toothbrush. He didn't need any of the other things. He was quite fine. You know, he needed a toothbrush. And I sat down with him on that heating vent. Yeah, I remember I could only get one cheek on the vent and the other one was freezing. And this one was hot and wet because it's hot, wet heat that comes up. And he's showing me a picture, a crumpled up picture of a baby who would probably be 30 years old now, and telling me his story. And when I got up to leave, he says, I've just given you everything I've got, my name and my story. Oh, I feel honored. I left him on that heating vent. He was there the next day. He was there 5 years later. No. Sure, I think that he should probably have housing, and I think he should have this, and he should have that, and the other thing. But if he doesn't think he should have that, then, you know, I mean, I do kind of think that if you prefer being out in -30 weather than being inside, that tells me something about your mental health. But, you know, that was his thought. Don't try to be expert in things you know little about. So like I said, a lot of the folks I see come, they're doing their 4th step, they're in AA or something, and they should only be talking about their addiction and not their trauma. But they talk about their trauma to somebody that doesn't understand about trauma, and it messes them up. And ask Jesus what he would have you do. Always, that should be top of the list. Always. So the behavioral goals are always to move towards abstinence and to move towards decreasing or eliminating trauma symptoms. Some trauma symptoms, like I said, are going to be like cancer. They're going to go into remission and then they'll come back up again, and then they'll go away and then they'll come back up again. You know, some will be eliminated. Just like for some people, the journey towards abstinence may involve them relapsing at different times until they can get their feet on the solid ground. Doesn't have to. I don't prescribe it. It's what you're going to see. You want to enhance coping skills, safety, always safety, and self-care, because the traumatized person always acts out of a lack of safety. Their world is not safe. Yeah, it's good for them to have, you know, an active structured program. So that's where, you know, the church should be more like 12-step meetings, you know, where the rich man and poor man sit side by side, united in a common purpose. It's not usually like that. Most of my street friends, if I bring them into a church, the church either treats them like they're super special, like, oh, look, Sally, here's a homeless person, you know, and like over, you know, love bombs them, or like, whoa, oh no, we're not giving anything out for free today. You know, I remember Christmas Eve, a couple of my street friends, they wanted to go to a church and they told me what kind they wanted. I want a church where the man wears a dress and where he has lots of smoke going around. And so anyway, as they described it, I went, oh, that'd be a high Anglican church. So I know the fellow that runs a high Anglican church. And so we stand in line to go in, and they all come fuss around me. Oh, Susan, it's so nice you're coming for midnight mass. I said, yeah, I'm glad to be here. And then they stopped my friends and they said, no, we're not giving anything out for free tonight. And I said, oh, have you met my brother and my sisters here? You know, one is African-American, one is Indigenous, one is, you know, just, I said, have you met them before? Anyway, we go into the service and they of course say, oh, no, of course they can come in with you, Susan. And partway through, the one gal says, I gotta go for a smoke. And I go, okay, let's quietly go out for a smoke. But she pulls out, you know, like a big spliff, eh? And she goes over to, it's one of those churches where you can light candles. And she goes over there, you know, like this. And of course, the church bouncers come running over, and she takes off outside and gets stoned. And then, they're doing the processionals with the bells and smells. And then there's a big crucifix hanging from the ceiling with Jesus on the cross, a great big one. This is kind of like an Anglo-Catholic church or something. But anyway, then Alan jumps up during a quiet time. He jumps up and he says, I'm talking to you. Come down here right now. I want to meet you. Come down here right now. Like this. Everybody's like, oh my gosh. And they look over and they look at him like, Alan, like this. And, he's talking to Jesus. He wants Jesus to come and meet him right now. And the bouncers are like, whoo, coming over, and I'm going, settle down, Anyway, it was a very eventful midnight mass. But sometimes our churches are not so welcoming to some people. Okay. And always we have to remember, it's not my agenda. Sometimes if you're employed somewhere, you may have an agenda, but it's not my agenda. It's my hope that you can find freedom in Christ. It's my hope that you don't miss out on the joy that God's got planned for you. And for that, I'm willing to give you my time, and I'm willing to give you my love, and I'm willing to believe for you the things that you don't believe yet in yourself. I had to have somebody believe that they could see something good in me for a long, long time before I ever believed it in myself. Okay. We want to be able to identify high-risk situations, whether there's a potential for harm of the individual or harm of somebody else. We don't want to agree to confidentiality, until we know what we're agreeing to. Do you promise you won't tell anybody if I tell you this? Well, that depends. What are you going to tell me? I can't agree to confidentiality. And well, I can say, and what I do say is, in this room, things are confidential unless you're going to hurt yourself, hurt somebody else, or, somebody vulnerable is being hurt. I'm in a clinical setting like that, but you don't want to get trapped in a corner where you say that you'll keep something confidential that you can't keep confidential. You're going to say, I only want the best for you. What you tell me now, said in the room stays in the room. But if somebody's being hurt, I can't allow anybody else to be hurt. Right? You want to teach some life management skills. I mean, I got hauled into court one day. One of my clients was in court, and they said to me, well, it's come to our attention that you had lunch with your clients, and so with this particular client, so you're crossing boundaries. In other words, I'm a bad counselor. And at the family center where I'm the counselor, we all have lunch together. And the people gather there, and they gather there every day. And so I did a whole spin on how I was teaching pro-social skills, how to sit at a table, which knife, fork to use, and, how to teaching life skills. And that was okay. But, you want to look at dual relationships you might have with the individual. I've often said, because I work with folks in the inner city, that the inner city is a city inside the city. 4 o'clock, there's migration patterns. I know that Frankie and the gang are crossing a certain street to go to this shelter to get some food. Then they'll be leaving and they'll be going over to this park to hang out. And then there's migrating patterns. And you get to know what that is. And so I live right in the hood. The only place in Calgary where you're going to see people, sleeping with tarps and cardboard boxes and stuff is on the street I'm on. And for the most part, and they know me in a lot of different hats. I'm their pastor. I do all bury the homeless folks. I'm the counselor. They're my neighbor, but the onus is on me to be able to have healthy boundaries and to know where those boundaries stop and start. So if someone's coming to you for help, and in a private setting, and then you run into them at Tilly's, then you know, you don't want to be talking to them about that stuff in Tilly's. You don't want to be talking to them, you know, you want to make sure that there's safe spaces and places. And so that's really important. Triggers. So people are triggered to different things. So I had a fellow say to me in the addiction program, he said, well, I'm triggered by the Rocky Mountains because every time all my life I've gone to the Rocky Mountains, I've always been drunk out of my mind. So if this means now in sobriety, I can never go to the mountains again. And I said, well, don't be ridiculous. I said, of course you can go to the mountains again, but you have to learn how to reclaim it. So there's some triggers that don't have to be lifelong things to avoid, but to reclaim it means to be exposed to it. And so with him, I took him for a drive out to the mountains where we stopped the car. And how are you feeling now? And how are you feeling now? And how are you feeling now? You know, and we did a couple of trips like that until he was able to have a cup of tea in Canmore and felt great. And so, you know, you may have opportunity to help with some exposure like that. And if you do, baby steps, right? And, you know, if someone hates the, for example, I'll tell you, self-disclosure, you know, but I hate the color orange. I hate the color orange. There is no orange in my house. There's no orange in my life. When I was a kid, the only color my mother liked was orange and olive green. I have none of that around me. But, you know, it's, I mean, come on, Susan, you're a big girl now. You can wear some orange. I'm very aware I've got some orange on here, but it's for a purpose. And funny what things trigger you. Color orange triggers me. Not that you wear it, but if it's on me, I don't like it. So, you know, that exposure. I even tried, you know, like got myself a dress that was all orange with green leaves on it. I think I wore it once, and then it went to the secondhand store. But exposure, if I'd kept at it, you know, and was really willing to put the effort into it, I probably could stand here wearing orange. But cravings. So dealing with cravings, recognizing that a craving rarely lasts more than 20 minutes. Rarely lasts more than that. And if you can get through it moment by moment, and that's the thing, you've got to pull your time in, you know, so it's not one day at a time, maybe it's 1 minute at a time. And you want to be able to practice thought stopping. Maybe you've got a hamster wheel in your head that continually says, got to get high, got to get high, got to get high. You want to do some stop the thoughts. Maybe you envision a red stop sign. Every time you say that in your imagination, there's the stop sign, stop, stop, stop. And eventually you'll stop. Eventually it'll just glaze your thinking and you'll put it away. But you want to practice thought stopping. It's good to plan out high-risk situations. So you're going to go to a family event this weekend and there's going to be drinking. How are you going to manage staying sober? You know, first of all, do you need to go to this? If you do, make a safety plan. You know, write out a safety plan. You know, if this happens, what if you're stuck at the event and you don't have a ride or anything? Have money in your pocket for a taxi. You know, like make sure that you have ways of taking care of yourself if you have to be in high-risk situations. And to practice those skills, you know, in between wanting to help the person, you can give them some homework, you know, have them write some stuff out. Journaling is great. There may be all kinds of journaling, might do gratitude journaling. I tell folks, start every morning when you brush your teeth with I am statements. I am is a power statement. I am creative. I am loving. I am caring. I am. Speak the truth to yourself, whether you feel it or not. I may not feel like I'm creative or caring or loving, but if I know I am, then say it. We all saw the movie about the Jamaican bobsled team. What a great movie. Those guys are practicing on the sand and they're going, I am going to win the Olympics. I am a great bobsledder, even though I've never seen snow. And, and, you know, when people think back to that particular Olympics in Calgary, who do they think of? The Jamaican bobsled team. No, they didn't come in first, but they won in terms of personality, perseverance, and you know, the Olympic athlete doesn't say, oh, maybe perhaps I might get a medal. They say, I am a winner, you know. And so you always want to go for your greatest best. And so I am statements. And then I tell them every night before you go to sleep, do gratitude statements. What are you grateful for? If you can't think of anything, be glad a dog didn't bite you today. Could have happened. And if you fall asleep as you're thinking about gratitude, guess what you'll dream about? What you're grateful for. You know, and that can circumvent nightmares. We're always concerned about relapse prevention. And by relapse prevention, I'm, like I said, I don't just mean relapsing back into mood altering drugs or behavior. It might be, you know, emotional thinking, trauma responses. And because they're learned behaviors, they can be unlearned. Survival skills can be updated. I always refer to what you have done to try and stay alive as being pretty remarkable survival skills. But somewhere along the line, they stopped working for you. They need to be updated. And that sounds a whole lot different than, you know, just stop that behavior and just do this other thing. So affirming that the person maybe has tried the best they can do with what they had. You know, what do you know as a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old trying to survive in a home of incredible chaos and addiction and confusion? So we know that change and reconnection is possible. We also know that reconnecting with family members that have let go of us a long time ago is possible. Doesn't mean it always happens, but sometimes it does happen. And it can be a good thing, and sometimes it's not a good thing. Like the person who was taken away from his mother, put into the foster system for years and years, and then in sobriety wants to meet his mother. But it doesn't go well because the mother doesn't want to meet him. And so sometimes, you know, things can go well, reconnection go well, sometimes it doesn't. Remembering that these skills and that our behaviors all serve a function. We only do what we do repeatedly because it has some kind of function in our life. Otherwise, we wouldn't behave like that. Whether it's a manipulation, whether it's you know, some survival strategy, whether it's a way of coercing, you know, people to enable you or whatever, everything has a payoff. And so we need to uncover, if you do this particular behavior repeatedly, you know, and it's like stubbing your toe all the time, then what's the reward of that? That you can go around saying, ow, a lot, you know, but there's some reward. So you want to look at the positive consequences of making changes in your life as well as the negative consequences. So the positive consequences might be that you can, you know, eat, taste, smell better, everything is a little better, you feel more at peace, you feel more joy. You know, the negative consequences of recovery might be that you can't hang around with people that you thought were your friends, even though they're not really your friends, or some of them might be wonderful people who are just addicted, but that you need to make changes because you need to be safer than hanging out with other addicts. And it's important to look at that. you know, you need to wrestle with the notions of abstinence and harm reduction. And I don't mean harm reduction like I see it happening in the downtown of the city, where, you know, we're going to just indiscriminately give out needles and crack pipes and, you know, and, or even what's happening. Last time I was training outreach workers in the downtown east side, they have vending machines now for low dose heroin, where you get a special token because you're an addict, and you can put it in the machine and you can get a daily dose of heroin every day from the machine. On the other hand, you know, there's a lot of talk about safe supply of drugs, because the stuff that's on the streets is killing people. On our street, we did a service, 6-month service, and we had 58 people just on my street, a 2-block area, who had died of fentanyl overdose. We have the coroner on the street all the time. Well, safe supply. Now they say that, you know, borders being crossed, and so much of the fentanyl is coming from China to Mexico, Mexico up the coast. And as the border became more difficult to go across the border, then people were using recipes and making it with home chemistry sets, and people are dying. Yes, of course we want to reduce harm. Of course I want to reduce harm, but I got to meet the person where they're at. And I've got to always push them towards abstinence and say, you can have a life that's free of this. Okay, yes, I'm impressed that you've gone from drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day down to having 6 beers a day. You know, that's good. That's a start. Let's keep going. You know, let's keep going. But the goal, the absolute goal is abstinence. And we know a lot of the people we see who are chronically in their addiction, they're not going to find any peace in their life until they finally get to the place where they can lay it down, where they can abstain. They can't do this slow metering off of the drugs or alcohol very easily at all. But if we demand abstinence and we're taking away their medication, we better have something else that we can bring into them. A circle of support, safety, you know, other ways of coping. We want to continually in our, you know, if we're in a helping position, we want to assess the individual's motivation level. And this is where you go back to the notes on motivational interviewing, that if people slide back and forth. You know, they're really motivated to make a change, and then not so much. I'm really motivated to stay on my program and be on the treadmill every day and do everything that my physio wants me to do. And then frankly, I'm not. You know, I just want a big dish of Dairy Queen, you know, and so just to keep the motivation level up. And I remember when I was telling the physio guy I wanted to be healthier, and that every month that the doctor weighs me, he said, that's not going to work. He says, we need to do it every week. And I'm going, oh, you know, but anyway, we're on the program. And I make a distinction between lapsing and relapsing, because the healing journey goes from your life is full of negative consequences of your behaviors and your substance using to freedom. Don't we wish that was a straight line? It's not, though. You move forward, and then you do a few steps back, and then the trajectory moves you forward, and then you go back a bit, and then you move forward, and you go back a bit. And that's the natural course of healing. Very rarely do you see somebody that just goes zoop like that. I don't see it very often. So we want to reinforce new coping skills. We want to help people resist social pressure. How do you say no when it's offered to you? How do you say no when you walk by in your sister's house and the bong's sitting on the table and nobody's around? How do you say no to that? You want to be able to let your no be no and your yes be yes, to be clear. Relaxation, stress management's got to be a daily thing. You want to increase your communication skills, you want to have assertiveness training. You want to be able to say, instead of you piss me off, to say, you know, I feel disrespected when we have an appointment and you show up late and I need you to be on time or else I won't be able to meet with you. Clear to the point? I'm not, you know, I'm not wagging my finger, you in someone's face, but I'm just telling them that this is just a fact. Anger management, you know, I often use yellow light, green light, red light. Well, green, yellow, red, you know, in the green zone, you're aware that you're starting to get tense, but you can control it. The yellow zone, you can feel it rising, but, you know, and you're hoping that you can control it. And then when you're in the red zone, you're just blowing out and probably you're not controlling it. And so for the person to be more aware in their body, one good exercise for awareness is, can you tell right now where you feel stress in your body? A good exercise to do at night, and it also helps you fall asleep, is, you know, lying in bed and you crunch up your toes real tight and then you relax them. You crunch them up. And while you do it, you're breathing deeply. You crunch up your ankles and relax. You crunch up your legs, relax. You crunch up your bum, you go crunch, crunch, crunch all the way up till the top of your head, and then you should be relaxed. So if I were to ask you, you know, does your elbow feel stressed right now or not? You know the difference between an elbow that's like that or an elbow that's like that. You know the difference between a hand that's like this and a hand that's like that. So that you could, after a while doing that, you can do it faster and faster until you do body scanning, we call it, where you can just kind of visualize from your feet up and where are you holding stress in your body. And then breathe into that, relax that, shake that out, you know. Dr. Bessel says that the two exercises that help you release trauma from the body, the two most effective exercises, one that we should just rename it now, just for sake of pleasing each other and not call it yoga, but it's doing stretching exercises. Not the mantra so much as doing the stretching exercises. And then the other one is swimming. That those are the two best exercises for truly relaxing your body. So that's good. In addition to that, any exercise in your body is good. Any cardio, you know, as well as relaxation exercises. So you want to encourage the person, and you've probably heard that going for a long walk is as good as taking an antidepressant, because it releases, you know, it releases the endorphins in your mind. I mean, it helps to reduce the inflammation, which brings on depression. So exercise is very important. And then teaching social skills. You know, when I first came off the streets, I didn't know how to sit at a table properly, you know, and if I was sitting talking to you and my crotch was itchy, I'd scratch it, you know, like I just didn't know. I just did what I did, right? And I needed to be taught some social skills. Like, you know, like that's probably not a good thing to do in public at church, you know, and so, you know, so we have to learn that and recognize that some people you're dealing with may not have social skills, you know, and so you want to, you know, what about if you did this? Have you considered that someone else might find that, I don't care what people think. Well, you know, like, let's think about that. And, you know, just to make changes, lifestyle changes. You want to increase pleasant activities. Well, you want people to have fun things that they can do. You know, my clients go, oh, that F word. Yeah, fun. You know, you need to have fun in your life and increase positive passions and habits and hobbies. And, you know, what are you interested in? You know, what really gets you going? it makes sense in my life that so much of my life has been working for social justice and has been working to help hurting people, because that was the closest thing to my heart, and made sense out of my lived experience that I would be with the homeless and I would be with this population. I took a business course once, you know, to how to be an entrepreneur. And it was all like, what's this guy's name? Tracy, somebody Tracy, that, you know, says how you have to make lots of money and it's all about, you know, and boy, we wrestled because they wanted me to, you know, you got to charge a lot of money and just get rich people. And I said, no, I'm supposed to be with poor people, you know, and well, you can't do that. And you know, you got to have passions. You got to put your passions in. If God is leading you to it, he will give you everything you need to get through it, right? And he's taken care of me. I'm not starving to death. I'm doing pretty good, you know, considering that, you know, I'm not making hundreds of dollars an hour, which I think is kind of a sin. I don't know. For me, I probably wouldn't do well with it. Probably give it away. Prioritize your life in a way that honors you, that honors God, it should say, that honors God, you know, that, and you got to recognize you don't want to leave your spouse at home because you're out saving the world, right? It's God, isn't it God, family, and then everybody else, something like that. It's, you know, you want to take good care of your own family, as well as what you may feel is your passion in terms of being a people helper. Yeah, well, we've talked about this, the vicious cycle, you know, that traumatic events increases drug use increases traumatic events. You know, there's a cycle that goes on there. And so I'll just go ahead. Okay, we want to do something that that might be kind of interesting. So there's not so many of you that we can't break up into 3 groups and then meet in 3 different sections. So why don't we number off 1, 2, 3? Are you going to be participating? 1, 2, 3. Back row. 1, Lydia. 3. 1 way in the back. 2. Oh, there you are. 3. 1 over here. 2, 3. Sliding along here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Crystal, are you participating? Yeah, oh, it's okay. We'll wait for you to come back. Okay, 3. Okay, I'll go over here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Did I get you already? 2. Did I get you? Okay, 2, 3, 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Why don't you just kind of meet in your sections there? You're front and center, number 2. And try to sit somewhere close to each other so you can actually talk to each other. Yeah. Yeah. So you can even make a group, you know, sit here and sit, because you're going to discuss some stuff together. Okay. Yeah. Are you okay there? You sure? That's fine. That's fine. Good, good. And is it good so that you can kind of talk amongst yourselves? Okay. All right. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to have some discussion together. You have a case study, and I want you to read the case study amongst yourself. And then there's some questions at the end of the case study. And I want you to come up with a plan. I need one person to be a scribe in each group. to write down the ideas on how you're going to handle the situation that you're faced with in this case. So let's take 15 minutes and, you know, give it a good conversation as to how you're going to help this individual, and then come up with a plan of action, and we'll take a look at that in about 15 minutes. Sound good? All right then. Okay, if you can kind of wrap up your thoughts. Now I would ask that your scribe, the person that's going to present for your team, come up here, please. Yeah, come on down. You're the next. Yeah. Yeah. Come on up. Okay. Okay, what we're going to do, folks, yeah, come on up. Welcome, welcome to Star of Stage and Screen. Here we are. Yes. So what I'd like you to do is, and which one was team number one? Over here. Okay, so we'll have you go first. And I'd like you to read out the case study. And then I'd like you, there's the microphone for you. Thank you. In case you want to break out into song. But read the case study for our viewers online and the millions and millions of people that are watching you right now. Yes. And then tell me what conclusions your team has come from. It's all good.
Okay, Teresa. Teresa is a 32-year-old woman who frequently misses her appointments with you. And at other times, she shows up without an appointment, often in crisis. She currently uses alcohol and pot and has started to use street drugs like opioids. As you have developed a caring relationship with Teresa, you learn that she grew up in a household with a violent father who frequently assaulted her mother, her siblings, and herself. Although now estranged from her father, the impact of his violence presents itself daily as Teresa struggles to cope with the trauma she experienced. Teresa left school early, has few marketable skills, and has never been able to hold a job for more than 3 months. Teresa receives $700 per month from welfare and has no money left for food or other essentials at the end of the month. She is currently in a relationship with a man whom you suspect may be violent. So the question is, what are your next steps with Teresa? How do you go about providing trauma-informed care? Is a crisis intervention required? Safety first. What are some other interventions you could make to improve Teresa's health in this situation? Assess Teresa's mental health status regarding trauma and history of mental health care. Explore her substance use and whether it places her at high risk for addiction and suicide. Explore issues of trauma, income support, and her housing situation. So what we came up with was to ask her what her needs are, set boundaries, check about home safety concerns.
What boundaries?
Boundaries as far as, because she's showing up unexpected or late
Yes,
for
good.
appointments.
Mhm.
Ask her if she wants to talk about other options and what her needs are, as far as like the food bank or prepare a snack for your time together with her. Her options, ask her if she's open to speaking with a counselor, as far as they have more knowledge in that area.
Mhm.
If she's in danger, let her know the resources that are available. So whether it be for the, like I said, the food bank, the shelter, counselor, mental health, different. And about talking with a professional expert in that area. Have a listening ear and provide a safe space for her to talk.
Okay, let's go back to the boundaries. What are you going to actually say to her to establish a boundary? So she's not showing up for some appointments and then she shows up and she doesn't have an appointment. And so how are you going to address that with her?
It was talked about in our group also that maybe she's unable to keep boundaries because the abusive situation at home, maybe the partner's driving her and he doesn't want her getting help. So there may be stumbling blocks in her path that's making her late. It may not be like intentional to put you out.
So how do you, so you inquire about that? You're going to investigate that,
Yes.
you know, and again, establishing the boundary, it doesn't work for me for you to not show up when we have time together, because I know your time's important. My time's just as important. And I need you to come on time. Is there a barrier to you figuring out the time, Do you not have a watch? Do you need a day timer? Do you need a reminder call? What would help
She may
you?
not have a phone because she only gets $700 a month
She
and
may
no
not
money
have a
for
phone.
food. So she may not even have a phone.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So maybe she can use a calendar
Mhm.
and mark things down. How do you teach her that you have boundaries? That's important, because that's also about her safety, right? She's not going to feel safe without knowing that there's boundaries. And it's also a control issue,
Mhm.
the control, and not that want to fight for power and control, but you want to say, this is what I can offer to you, and this is what I need from you. Okay, let's put it out there. Any other ideas about this situation? So how do you prioritize the care out of her situation from what you've read? What is the most important issue?
Ask her what she needs.
Get her perception of it. Yeah.
Because like you shared earlier, all these ideas, but then when you asked, it was a toothbrush.
Yeah, it
nothing that was
could be
talked about.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And though she might say, she might be deflecting, she might not tell you, what it is that she actually needs, and you're observing something. And you can ask, would you like me to share what I see, as a possibility? Would it be possible that, that this issue is what's keeping you stuck, and, hone in right. Well, the first thing would be establishing a safe boundary, but then from there, sort of doing a bit of a triage as to, out of this whole list of things that are troublesome in her life, what are the things that are about establishing safety? And, but well done. Good conversation. Thank you. Oop, I got to stop doing that. Remember I told you about hyperstartle reflex? Oh, man. So number 2.
Great. So Joseph is a 55-year-old First Nations man on AISH disability support program due to a physical back injury in the factory he worked in. Despite his injury, he still receives work health benefits and can perform some activities of daily living. Due to his chronic back pain, his doctor has prescribed oxycodone, which he uses in increasing measure. He also uses marijuana daily because it makes him feel more in control. He is recently divorced, lives alone, and is finding it hard to cope with this loss. Joseph presents to you reporting increasing pain. During your conversation, you discover that he is concerned re the increasing amount of marijuana he is using to combat his pain and feelings of isolation. And the questions are, what are your next steps with Joseph? How would you conduct a motivational interview? What strategies could you provide that would support a recovery-oriented approach? How does his culture and diversity relate to his mental health and intergenerational trauma, grief, and loss?
Okay, what did you come up with?
So we talked about also asking him what he felt that he needed. We talked about just safety and stabilization, to express empathy, to be a good listener, to ask questions, to encourage him, ask him sort of he shared where he was at, and just to maybe ask where he would like to be, providing, having conversation, helping him make connections. We talked about asking him what resources he had pursued in terms of, had he only tried medications or physio, like what kinds of things, counseling, what has he done and what has worked and what hasn't worked. Maybe we talked about suggesting some mindfulness exercises, just getting more information. What does his routine look like? What does his day-to-day look like? And what supports and support people does he already have in his life? And how can we maybe help build a community around him to support him? And then just patience in walking with him as he makes changes in his life.
Okay. Okay, well done. What is his main problem? The number one issue for him?
His marijuana use and feelings of isolation.
What you may or may not know about opiates is that when you're prescribed opiates, which he's on for pain, that works for a season. And then when the brain is sufficiently convinced, it's almost like the brain's got a mind of its own. When the brain is sufficiently convinced that it does not need to provide any more endorphins, which are our natural pain relievers, because it can get pain relief from the pills on the outside, it will make the body want more and more by doing phantom pain. So you go in, you've got a back injury, the doctor puts you on hydromorphone or puts you on codeine or some kind of, it's all part of the same opiate family. And if you're on it for a sufficient period of time, which may vary from person to person, after a while, your back will get worse and the pain will get worse and worse. And that's your addiction telling you it wants more pills. Isn't that curious? Yeah, that's, so that's something that's important to note, because we all know people that are on pretty strong painkillers. Some people, stay on and just get stronger and stronger medication and stay on the painkillers. This opiates have a way of just rotting out your stomach, and it has terrible side effects. But one of the side effects is that it can cause you to have pain that feels much worse than the original pain when you first went on it. So he's focusing on the marijuana instead of the opioids. And one of the reasons is that opioids are narcotics, and narcotics make you feel, happier at first than any human being should ever feel. That's why people become heroin addicts and they become opioid addicts. Okay, thank you. Very well done. Was there anything else you wanted to mention? Okay, let's look at least but not last. No, last but not least. Oh dear. Sorry, Donna. Dear. How to make friends.
Okay, so we have Thomas. Thomas is an 18-year-old high school student. He visits us during church in distress. He tells us that he uses drugs because he's being bullied at school because the kids think he is gay. Thomas tells us he thinks he might be transsexual, but that he's scared to tell anyone, and voices suicide ideation. He's not supported at home. His mother and father, both professionals and heavy drinkers, work long hours, and his older sister picks on him. Thomas's best friend since the age of 10 recently told him he didn't want to hang out with him anymore because he was weird. A few months ago, another friend who was picked on more than Thomas committed suicide. So several questions that go with this, so we'll maybe go at them bit by bit.
That's fine.
What are your next steps with Thomas? And so because of the suicide ideation, that was sort of a flag for us. And so we discussed it and we thought likely do some sort of an assessment with him. He's done a lot of disclosure already with us in the church about his situation. So we want to try to determine where he's at with the suicide ideation and move forward with that. Next question, do you have any immediate concerns in terms of Thomas's safety? And again, it's when we have clients, we want to make them feel safe. The next question, how do you conduct a suicide assessment? So in this case, we know that Thomas is using drugs. So part of it might be just how he is as he comes to us, to understand just where he's at, in his coherence when he walks in to see us. But that's just my own perception. How do you conduct a suicide risk assessment with him? Well, we've been given that already by Susan with the yes/no questions. Again, we can do it with yes/no questions. I guess part of it is, I would suggest part of it is presentation, but at the same time,
Yeah, I heard someone over there saying, should we give them a quiz? No, you don't give a handout. What you do is you learn about what the information is that you want to get from the assessment, and then you put it into the conversation so that you get answers to those questions. What's one of the flags that makes you think that he's at a higher risk for suicide?
The concern was the fact that he had a friend
Yes.
who has
Good.
already committed suicide.
Yes.
Because Thomas is 18 years old, his brain is not fully developed until he's 25.
That's right.
He's more apt to mirror an action that a peer has done. And
Copycat.
so a copycat.
Yeah.
And we have seen this in our own,
That's right.
surrounding areas. And so very, very concerning. Yes. Is a crisis intervention required? Again, it's based on the one-on-one time that we spend with him, his body language, his how he interacts with us, the rapport that we can create in that time. But yes, the response to this suicide assessment that we're doing, but as we move through it, the responses, whether we can trust them or not, but then also we move into the community support. And so that's the next question. What kinds of community-based support strategies would you recommend? First of all, we assess to see, is there anyone that he trusts? It doesn't appear that he has anyone within his immediate family, but is there a teacher? Is there a relative? Is there a neighbor? Is there someone that he has a rapport with already that he has disclosed to, that he has a relationship with? Or is it, someone within the church, someone within a club or something like this? And then the next question, do you approach Thomas's family? He's 18 years old. And so that is self-disclosure. My brother committed suicide when he was in his 30s. And I had a sister who would phone me 3 or 4 times a year saying she was going to commit suicide, and did that for several years. So this is
A tough one,
a tough one.
a tough one.
Yeah. So the disclosure component, yeah. Do we disclose to the family? He's 18. And so by law,
Right.
no,
That's right.
we're not to disclose to the family. And that is very, 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 very hard when you have someone who's suicidal. But you don't take it on yourself. You make sure when they come to you and they tell you they have suicidal ideation, you, in your relationship as a counselor, you're already saying to them, prior to this, if you have that as a counselor, you've already said to them, as you share with me, this is the relationship that we have, that if you disclose anything and it's harmful to you or to someone else, then I will need to disclose to somebody. So
Same when you're not a counselor, when you're a caregiver, right? You don't
Yeah.
hold on to that yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you share that. And this is all happening in the church.
Yeah.
So
So-
do you tell the pastor?
my inclination would be to tell the police. I'm sorry. Again, self-disclosure, not the pastor.
Mhm. Okay, that's an interesting question. Why don't we throw that out here? Would you tell the pastor? The pastor's not a counselor.
He's not a counselor.
He disclosed it at church, right? He did.
He should be told because
No.
he is over the counselor. Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. It's, if you think that he is suicidal, you're not going to hold that
No.
into yourself.
No.
And you're going to say, well, you're here at the church. I think I would tell the pastor, but I'm also calling the police, and I'll let the
Yeah.
pastor know that in your church, we're now making a disclosure and we're going to call. Absolutely. I have never, ever called the police, child protection, or anybody without the person sitting with me. So I would have that discussion with them that you are not safe. The person may get up and bolt. He may bolt.
Yeah.
Well, that's his prerogative.
Yeah.
He can bolt.
Yeah.
But I'm not holding on to that information in silence.
Yeah.
First of all, most of us are not counselors, but even still, when it's a safety matter, and I may not be at church next week and he may come in. And, he may approach the pastor and the pastor doesn't know that he's already come. And so if it's a suicidal situation, yes. And also to recognize that healing comes in community. That someone with such multiple troubles, you don't want to be their hero. You want to be one of a number of people.
Yeah.
Because, we're not talking in the context here of a formal counseling session.
Yeah.
We're talking about being people helpers, caregivers, right? And so.
Susan, would you call the police, or would you just, I think for me, most of the time, it's just, let's go for a visit to the hospital and just go directly there. Because I think
Do you have a hospital that'll actually do something?
Probably never as much as we would like them to, but oftentimes that's a real wake-up call. And
Yeah.
taking them to the hospital and going through that, at least it's being put into the hands of people who know a whole lot more about dealing with that situation. Because sometimes the police can just be very, very traumatized.
The police will take them to the hospital.
Especially
Yeah.
for an 18-year-old.
Yes.
It's more of a question than it is an answer.
Well, I think that might be a judgment call. I might not be in a position to spend 12 hours sitting in a hospital. And then they will only admit you if you're killing the attending physician or killing yourself in front of the attending physician. They're not going to pay any attention to the fact that you do suicide ideation, you know, outside of those circumstances, at least not in Calgary. I don't see that happening. But if you have a crisis team, then maybe, yeah, and you've got the time, then maybe. But generally, you know, I tell them, if you are going to kill yourself and you've just told me you've got the weapon at home and you've got, you know, you've explained it all to me, I cannot keep this a secret. And I will need to call the police who will keep you safe. And yeah, that may not be so comfortable, but the police will take them in and they'll take them in and they'll get seen right away. That's right. And the police can even inform them and say, no, we think you should have a 72 hours in the psych department. So you know your resources better than me, but that's how I address that. Thank you very much, Donna. I appreciate that. Now, we've gone over a little bit. We've gone 10 minutes over. So let's have Janelle come up. And thank you for doing that exercise. Let me see if I had one parting word here, swan song, something. Who knows? I think I had a quote at the end. Okay, let's just see. Helen Keller, although the world is full of suffering, it's also full of overcoming suffering. So thank you very much. And I'll leave it to you.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Put my shoes on.
Yeah, we know that doing a conference like this, speaking multiple different sessions takes a lot of time, a lot of mental energy. And so we just really appreciate you
Thank
and
you.
the time that you've given this weekend. So thank you so much for coming out.
Thank
I want to say thank you to all of you guys for coming out. It was great to see you guys today. I hope you're able to take a lot of information home with you, lots to think about.